At my own appreciation dinner, my daughter toasted, "We're done taking care of you." She had no idea I was about to deny the $14,000 monthly payment that funded her entire lifestyle. Before continuing, write where you are from or what time it is. The arthritis in my left knee wasn't just pain, it was a thief. It had been stealing my life one small piece at a time. First, the long walks in the archives, then the gardening, and finally, even the simple joy of browsing a museum without wincing. "We have to do the replacement, Lena," my doctor said, his eyes kind but firm. "You've put it off long enough." I nodded, the clinical smell of the office sharp in my nostrils. I wasn't afraid of the surgery. I was an art historian, a curator by trade. I understood restoration. I understood the careful, precise work of saving something valuable. What I was afraid of was the recovery. "You'll be immobile for at least 2 weeks," the doctor warned. "You will need round-the-clock assistance. You cannot be alone." That night, I scheduled the conference call. It took a week to get both Celine and Adrian on the line at the same time. Their busy lives were a fortress. "The surgery is on the 15th, I said, my voice steady. "I'll be home 2 days later. The doctor says I'll need help for the first 2 weeks. Real help. I won't be able to cook or drive." I paused, took a breath, and made the request that felt like swallowing glass. "I was hoping you two could take turns. 1 week each, just to help me get through the worst of it." The silence on the line was heavy, thick with calculation. Celine sighed first, a long theatrical sound. "Oh, Mom. Of course. It's just, the timing is terrible. I have the launch of the new fall campaign. It's my busiest season." Her reluctance was a physical thing, a bitter taste in my mouth. "But for you, we'll make it work." "Yeah, Mom," Adrian echoed, his voice weary, as if I'd asked him to move a mountain. "I'm right in the middle of a major grant application. The deadline is a nightmare." The grant application, the same one he'd been in the middle of for 3 years. "But family comes first," he resigned. "I guess the film will just have to wait." They agreed, but it wasn't a gift. It was a bill. They were already calculating the cost of their time, a cost they fully expected me to pay. My name is Dr. Lena Moreau. For 40 years, my world was the quiet, climate-controlled halls of museums and the dusty archives of university libraries. When my beloved Samuel passed away, he left me our beautiful home and a modest portfolio. The real fortune, the one my children were so busy spending, I built myself. My eye was trained to see value where others saw none. A forgotten painting at an estate sale, a misattributed piece of pottery. I turned my passion into a lucrative consulting practice. My investments were shrewd, my work methodical. My children, Celine and Adrian, were the center of my universe. I wanted to give them the one thing I never had: freedom from financial worry. So I established the Moreau Family Foundation. It was managed by my discreet lawyer, Mr. Kincaid. It was meant to be a foundation, not a crutch. Upon their 25th birthdays, they each began receiving a generous stipend. The amount was substantial, $7,000 each, a total of $14,000 a month. It was, I believed, the greatest gift a mother could give, the gift of a life without fear. I wanted Celine to build her business, Adrian to produce his documentaries. I gave them wings. I waited to watch them fly. Instead, they just hovered. At 36, Celine was a lifestyle brand consultant. Her Instagram was a flawless tapestry of curated beauty. One week, she was at a tropical resort, a sponsored caftan billowing. The caption, "Manifesting your best life." The next, she was in a minimalist, all-white kitchen, artfully arranging organic produce. Her followers saw a self-made woman. They didn't see that the ticket, the lease on the apartment, the very organic produce. It was all funded by the quiet monthly deposits from a mother she rarely mentioned. At 34, Adrian was an independent documentary filmmaker. He lived in a trendy industrial loft, a space with exposed brick and vintage film cameras that were purely decorative. He was, as he always told me, perpetually in pre-production. In 10 years, he had yet to produce a single finished film. They had taken the freedom I gave them and built beautiful, hollow facades. The first time I heard the lie, it was a shock. Selene had stopped by on her way to yoga. I was slicing a tomato for the lunch I was making her. She was in the living room, her voice a low murmur. "I know, it's exhausting," she said to a friend. "I have to go see my mother. It's like a whole day. The emotional labor is just draining. But what can you do? She's all alone. She needs me." I stood frozen, the knife hovering. Emotional labor. She needs me. I was a perfectly healthy, independent 65-year-old woman. Her visits were a rarity. Then the terrible truth clicked into place. In her mind, she wasn't the recipient of my generosity. She was the caregiver. The $7,000 a month wasn't a gift. It had been reframed in the twisted logic of her entitlement as a payment. It was a salary for the job of being my daughter. Once I saw it everywhere. I looked at the phone in my hand. The conference call finished. They had agreed to help. They were employees, assigned an unpleasant new project. I wheeled myself into the hospital, my small bag on my lap. I signed the admission forms, my hand steady. I wasn't afraid of the surgeon's steel. I was afraid of the bill my children were about to deliver. I came home in a fog of anesthesia and pain. Selene was already there, but she wasn't waiting at the door to help me. I saw her through the living room window, her back to me, pacing as she shouted into her phone. "No, I told them the deliverables are non-negotiable. I'm dealing with a family emergency. You have to handle it." I gripped my walker, my teeth clenched as I navigated the single step up to the porch. She didn't even turn around. My comfortable guest room was immediately transformed into her satellite office. 3 suitcases were splayed open. My quiet home, my planned sanctuary of recovery, was filled with the sounds of her loud, important-sounding conference calls. "Mom, I'm just in the middle of a synergy meeting," she'd snap, holding up one finger as I waited in the doorway, needing help to get a glass of water. Her idea of caring for me was to order expensive, exotic meals from food delivery apps. I'm talking $80 for a single portion of mushroom risotto that my stomach, churning from the pain medication, couldn't handle. "I can't eat this, dear," I said gently on the third night, the rich smell turning my stomach. Could you possibly just make me a piece of toast?" She let out a long, put-upon sigh. "Mom, I don't cook. I'm ordering you the best. This is organic. It's clean. I can't." "Fine," she snapped, grabbing the container. "I'll eat it. I can't let it go to waste." Later that night, my phone buzzed. It was an alert from the credit card I had given her strictly for household emergencies and my prescriptions. A charge from La Belle Vie Bistro. $212. I looked at the alert. I looked at the congealed cup of lukewarm tea she had finally brought me an hour after I'd asked. She wasn't just neglecting me. She was billing me for the privilege. She complained constantly. The Wi-Fi was too slow. My television didn't have the right streaming services. The silence of the suburbs was unsettling. I was a prisoner. I was in pain. I was vulnerable, and I was dependent on her for the most basic things. I endured the sighs, the eye rolls, the barely concealed impatience. On Friday morning, I was scrolling through my phone, trying to distract myself from the grinding ache in my new knee. And then I saw it. Her new post? It was a selfie, taken in my sunlit garden. She was wearing a beautiful linen dress, her face angled perfectly, A look of serene, thoughtful sacrifice. The caption, taking a quiet moment for self-care during a difficult family week. It's so important to find the light and recharge when you're in a caregiver role. Remember to fill your own cup. Family first. Caregiver life. The comments poured in. You're a saint, Celine. Your mother is so lucky to have you. Such a beautiful, giving soul. I looked at the photo, at the lie so blatant it stole my breath. This wasn't care. This was a marketing campaign. I was no longer her mother. I was her prop. I was the difficult family week she was bravely enduring. She came into my room, not looking up from her phone. Okay, Mom, I'm heading out for the weekend. I'm totally burned out. I need a spa day or I'm going to collapse. But who will? Adrian's coming, she said, waving a dismissive hand. He'll be here. Eventually. She left. The front door clicked shut. I was alone. The house was completely silent, except for the ticking clock and the throb of pain in my leg. Hours passed. The sun started to set. I hadn't eaten since the piece of dry toast I'd managed to get for myself that morning. My next dose of pain medication was on the kitchen counter, just out of reach. Adrian was nowhere. The house was dark. My throat was dry. I pressed the call button I'd been given, a small, useless bell. The silence was my only answer. My phone rang. It was Adrian. Hey, Mom, he said, his voice distant. Listen, I got held up. Hit a creative snag on the grant. I'm not going to make it tonight. I'll be there tomorrow, sometime. He hung up before I could reply. I sat in the deepening dark, a cold, hard knot forming in my chest. I looked at my walker, standing like a silent accusation across the room. It was 10 feet to the door, another 20 to the kitchen. I gripped the armrest of the chair, my knuckles white. I pulled myself to my feet. The pain was a white-hot spike, shooting from my knee to my hip. I wasn't just a prop. I was an inconvenience. A job they had both, in their own ways, decided to quit. I took one step, then another, my entire body shaking. They had left me. Adrian arrived the next day, not with an apology, but with a yawn. He slept until noon. He was not as overtly resentful as Celine, but his neglect was deeper, more profound. He saw his time at my house as an artist's retreat. He claimed my library, his headphones on, supposedly writing his grant proposal. I knew he was just watching obscure foreign films. My recovery was an inconvenient interruption to his creative process. I was hobbling on my crutches, trying to get a box of crackers from the pantry. My grip slipped. The crutch clattered to the tile floor, a sound like a gunshot in the silent house. I froze, balancing precariously on one leg, my breath hitched. In the library, the muffled sound of cinematic gunfire continued. He hadn't even heard. Or he hadn't cared. I had to brace myself against the wall, my new incision screaming in protest, and slide, inch by agonizing inch, to retrieve it. I was a 65-year-old woman, fresh from major surgery, and I was dragging myself across my own kitchen floor while my healthy 34-year-old son was in the next room breaking through. He lived on toast and the leftover expensive meal Selena had ordered and charged to my card. "Adrian," I called out, my voice hoarse. A long pause. "Yeah, Mom?" He didn't look up from his laptop. "I need my medication, the anti-inflammatory. It's on the top shelf in the bathroom. I can't reach it." A sigh. He pulled one headphone off his ear. "Mom, I am right in the middle of a creative breakthrough. Can it wait?" "No, Adrian. It can't." He stalked to the bathroom, the floorboards groaning under his resentment. He came back, slapped the bottle on the table beside me, and returned to his work without a word. This was their care. This was their stepping up. Through it all, I said nothing. I was in pain. I was vulnerable. I endured their sighs, their impatience. I listened to them on the phone with their friends, complaining about the nightmare of being stuck in the suburbs. The price of their care was my dignity, and the bill was becoming impossibly high. After 2 excruciating weeks, I was finally, blessedly, beginning to heal. I could move around the house on my own with a cane, my knee a dull ache rather than a searing pain. I could make my own tea. The period of my forced dependence was over, and with it, I thought, my children's resentful occupation of my home. I was wrong. Selene had one final performance in mind. She and Adrian were both in the kitchen, packing their bags to finally leave. I felt a wave of relief so strong it almost made me dizzy. Then Selena turned, her phone in her hand, her voice full of a bright, false generosity that set my teeth on edge. "Mom," she said, "now that you're feeling better, I think we should have a little celebration. A family appreciation dinner. This Saturday." "A dinner?" "Yes. Just two. You know, celebrate your recovery." It sounded lovely, but I knew my daughter. "I'll invite Auntie Denise and a few of the cousins," she continued, her mind already racing, and I thought it would be a nice chance. A really nice chance. To thank Adrian and me, in front of the family. She smiled, a wide, gleaming, predatory smile. "For all our help over the past few weeks. It's been a lot, and I think it's important to acknowledge that." There it was. It wasn't a celebration of my recovery. It was a public relations event. A self-congratulatory ceremony designed to showcase what wonderful, devoted, self-sacrificing children they were. They were throwing themselves a party. In my house. And I was expected to be the guest of honor at my own public humiliation. "That's a lovely idea, dear," I said, my voice carefully neutral. The path of least resistance was still, I told myself, the path to peace. It was a mistake. It was an invitation. The days leading up to the dinner were a frenzy of Selena's directorial ambitions. "We can't just have one of your casseroles, Mom," she said, wrinkling her nose at my suggestion. "This is a special occasion. I'll have that lovely little Italian place downtown cater. It's expensive, but it's worth it for a celebration." I knew, without asking, that the we who would be paying for this expensive catering was, in fact, me. I simply nodded. She rearranged the living room furniture, critiquing my choice of tablecloth. She spent an hour on the phone with the caterer, discussing wine pairings. She was an event planner, executing a brand-building opportunity. The stage was being set for her final grand performance. A performance in which she and her brother were the heroes, the selfless caregivers. And I was the grateful, tearful recipient of their noble sacrifice. She had written the script. She had designed the set. And I, in my weary, pained silence, had agreed to play my part. The night of the dinner arrived. My house was transformed. My solid oak dining table was covered in crisp white linen and set with gleaming rented silverware. The scent of an expensive, catered osso buco wafted from the kitchen, a foreign perfume in a space that usually smelled of my own simpler cooking. My sister, Denise, and a handful of cousins arrived, their arms full of flowers and bottles of wine. They came to me first, their faces full of genuine concern. "Lena, you look wonderful. How's the knee feeling? We were so worried." I smiled, a real smile. "Much better, thank you. I'm so glad you—" "They're here," Selene announced from the hallway. She and Adrian made their entrance. They were not children coming to a family dinner. They were the hosts, the stars of the evening. Selene was in a chic black dress, her smile bright and performative. Adrian was in his uniform of artistic seriousness, a black turtleneck, and a look of thoughtful detachment. They immediately took control of the narrative. "Thank you all for coming," Selene said, her voice ringing with a false, welcoming warmth. It's so wonderful to finally celebrate Mom's recovery. It's been a difficult few weeks for all of us, but we're just so happy to see her back on her feet. She and Adrian worked the room, accepting praise with a practiced, humble grace. You two have just been saints, one of my cousins said, her eyes shining with misguided admiration. Oh, it was nothing, Selena replied with a self-deprecating wave of her hand. You do what you have to do for family. We were just happy we could be there for her. Adrian, cornered by another cousin, adopted his look of noble sacrifice. The film had to wait, of course, he said with a weary sigh. But my mother's health, that's the real masterpiece, you know? I sat in my armchair in the corner, a smiling, silent observer at my own party. I listened to them spin their beautiful, intricate web of lies. They were so good at it. They had so completely rewritten the story of the past 2 weeks that they had actually come to believe it. They weren't the resentful, neglectful children who had treated their recovering mother as an inconvenience. They were the heroes. The performance was breathtaking in its audacity. And as I sat there, watching them soak in the undeserved praise, the cold, hard knot in my chest, the one that had been forming for years, finally solidified. It was no longer resentment. It was resolve. The doorbell rang one last time. It was my sister, Denise. She had been delayed. She walked in, took one look at the scene. Celine holding court, Adrian accepting a glass of expensive wine, me smiling weakly from the corner, and her face hardened. She walked straight to me, ignoring everyone. She bent down and whispered in my ear, "You're paying for this, aren't you?" I just looked at her. She squeezed my hand, her grip like steel. "They are monsters, Lena. Don't let them do this." But the dinner bell was ringing. Selene was calling everyone to the table. The performance was about to reach its climax. We moved to the dining room. The osso buco was served. The expensive wine was poured. Selena sat at the head of the table, in my late husband's chair. She was the mistress of ceremonies, the director of this final triumphant scene. She guided the conversation. She laughed at the right moments. She was the very picture of a successful, loving daughter. My sister Denise sat across from me, her face a mask of simmering fury. She watched her niece and nephew, her eyes missing nothing. After the main course was finished, during a lull, Selene stood up. She tapped her wine glass with a knife. The room fell silent. Her face was flushed with wine and success. This was her moment, the moment the entire evening had been building towards. "I just want to say a few words," she began, her voice full of warm, practiced sincerity. She spoke beautifully about family, about the importance of being there for each other in times of need. She spoke of the scare we'd all had with my surgery. "It really puts things in perspective," she said, her eyes shining with a false, sentimental light. "It reminds you of what's truly important." Then she turned to the true purpose of her speech. "And I just want to say, on behalf of myself and Adrian, how proud I am of us for stepping up these past few weeks." I watched my cousins nod, their faces full of admiration. I watched Adrian look down, a parody of humble sacrifice. "It wasn't easy," Selene continued, her voice gaining strength. "Our lives, our careers, they had to be put on hold, but we did it. We were there for our mother when she needed us." She raised her glass, a broad, self-satisfied smile on her face. She looked down the table directly at me. This final line was not for the guests. It was for me. It was a declaration, a final public statement of her role and of mine. "And now that Mom is better," she announced, her voice a bright, triumphant pronouncement. She paused for effect, and then she laughed, a light, witty, dismissive sound. "We're done taking care of you." It was a joke, a punchline, and the punchline was me. My son Adrian, sitting across the table, did not laugh. He just smirked, a small, cool, arrogant curve of his lips. It was a silent and utterly damning endorsement of his sister's cruelty. The insult, delivered with such bright, confident flourish, hung in the air. It was followed by a sound I will never forget, the sound of polite, complicit laughter. A few of my cousins, caught up in the triumphant narrative Selene had been spinning all night, chuckled. They saw it as she intended, a witty, modern daughter teasing her mother. They did not see the breathtaking cruelty beneath it. My sister Denise did. Her face went terrifyingly still. She stared at her niece with a look of such pure, unadulterated contempt that I thought she might actually strike her. But the loudest sound in the room, for me, was the silence. My silence. I stared at my daughter, this beautiful, monstrous stranger at the head of my table. I stared at my son, his arrogant smirk a mirror of his sister's smugness. In that single, terrible, and profoundly clarifying moment, something inside me finally and irrevocably broke. It wasn't a loud shatter. It was a quiet, clean snap. The sound of a cord, stretched to its absolute limit for years, finally giving way. The cord of a mother's unconditional love. The hurt, the anger, the resentment. It all vanished, replaced by a feeling of pure, cold, absolute power. And in that profound, terrible silence, as the polite laughter died down, a new sound emerged, a soft electronic buzz. My phone, sitting on the table beside my plate. The screen lit up, a small bright beacon in the tense atmosphere. Everyone was watching me now. My lack of reaction to Selena's joke was more unsettling than any outburst could have been. I picked up the phone, my movements slow, deliberate. The text message was not from a friend. It was not from a family member. It was from Mr. Kincaid, my lawyer, the discreet and efficient manager of the Moreau Family Foundation. The text was simple, professional, and utterly devastatingly opportune. It was a message he sent me on the first of every month, a simple procedural check-in before he executed the transaction that had been the invisible foundation of my children's lives for a decade. The text read, "Good morning, Dr. Moreau. It is the first of the month. Should I release their $14,000 monthly support?" The words on the screen seemed to hum with a strange, powerful energy. $14,000 monthly support. The number, the reality of it, stood in such stark, brutal contrast to the fiction that had just been so publicly, so smugly declared at my dinner table. "We're done taking care of you." The irony was so profound, so absolute. It was almost beautiful. They thought they were the caregivers. They had no idea that they were, and had always been, the dependents. I looked up from the glowing screen. I looked at my daughter's face, flushed with wine and self-satisfaction, her expression one of impatient, condescending curiosity. "What's wrong with Mom now?" her eyes seemed to say. I looked at my son, his smirk still playing on his lips, a study in arrogant detachment. In that moment, the decision was not a decision at all. It was a conclusion. A logical, inevitable, and deeply satisfying conclusion. The power to restore the balance was, quite literally, in the palm of my hand. My thumb, which had been hovering over the screen, moved with a calm, deliberate purpose. I typed a single, powerful, and utterly unambiguous word in response to Mr. Kincaid's question. Denied. The word on the screen was a beautiful, perfect, final thing. It was a closed door, a turned key, a final, emphatic, and long overdue no. I pressed send. The small swoosh sound of the message leaving my phone was almost inaudible. But to me, it was the sound of a guillotine blade falling, the sound of a final, irrevocable severance. The financial umbilical cord, which had been nourishing my two ungrateful adult children for a decade, had just been cut. And they had no idea. I placed my phone face down on the table. The small, quiet click of the glass on the linen was a sound of finality. The transaction was complete. I looked up, my gaze sweeping over the table, my cousins, watching me with confused concern. My sister, Denise, who was watching me with a dawning, fierce, and deeply appreciative understanding, and my children, who were watching me with annoyance, completely oblivious to the financial cataclysm that had just been unleashed upon their lives. I felt a strange, wonderful lightness. The burden I had been carrying for years, the burden of their entitlement, the burden of my own silent complicity was gone. I had been the secret, silent engine of their lives, and I had just turned the engine off. Slowly, and with a grace I did not feel but was determined to project, I folded my linen napkin and placed it on the table. I stood up. My movement, so quiet, immediately silenced the awkward chatter. All eyes were on me. "Mom, what are you doing?" Celine asked, her voice sharp with irritation. "Sit down. You're making a scene." "No, dear," I said, my voice calm and for the first time that night, completely free of tension. "You are quite right. This dinner is about you. And I would not want to spoil your moment." I looked down the table, my gaze settling finally on my children. "You are absolutely right, Celine," I said, my voice as cool and clear as a winter morning. "You have been so burdened for so long, and you are right to be done." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. "You are done, in every sense of the word." The double meaning, the quiet, devastating finality, was completely lost on them. Without another word, I turned and walked out of my own dining room. I did not storm out. I did not slam the door. My steps were unhurried, my posture erect, my cane tapping softly on the hardwood floor. I was not just leaving a dinner party. I was leaving the role of the quiet, accommodating, and endlessly forgiving mother. I retreated to the sanctuary of my study. I closed the door, the soft click of the latch a sound of profound relief. I walked to the window overlooking the moonlit garden. I could hear the faint, muffled sounds of the party continuing. A forced, too loud laugh from Adrian. They would be talking about me, of course. About my bizarre behavior, reinforcing their narrative. Let them talk. Their entire carefully constructed world was now operating on a timer, and they had no idea. I felt no guilt. I felt no remorse. I had just resigned, and I was finally free. The new reality began not with a bang, but with the quiet, humiliating beep of a declined credit card. The day after the disastrous dinner, Celine, in a characteristic act of self-care, went to her favorite designer boutique. The dinner had been a success in her mind. Her mother's bizarre exit was just another eccentric footnote. She had earned a reward for her weeks of hardship. She swept through the store, gathering an armful of expensive silks and cashmere. At the checkout, she presented her high-limit platinum card with a casual flourish. The sales clerk swiped it. A small, discreet, but unmistakable beep of denial. The clerk, her face a mask of politeness, swiped it again. The same quiet, ugly sound. "I'm so sorry, Miss Moreau," the clerk murmured, her eyes not quite meeting Celine's. "There seems to be a problem with the card." "That's impossible," Celine snapped, her voice sharp. "Try it again. It's a corporate card." A lie, of course. It was a card linked to the Moreau Family Foundation, a fact she rarely acknowledged. The clerk tried a third time. "I'm afraid it's been declined, ma'am," she said, her voice a low, embarrassed whisper. A hot, ugly flush crept up Celine's neck. A small line had begun to form behind her. She fumbled in her wallet for her debit card, her movements suddenly clumsy. "Fine," she hissed. "I'll use my debit." She inserted the card, punched in her PIN, and waited. The machine whirred for a moment. A new message appeared on the small screen. Insufficient funds. The first real crack in her perfect curated world had appeared. It was a small crack, but it was a public one. Humiliated, her face burning, she had to abandon her pile of expensive clothes on the counter. She fled the store, her mind a chaotic swirl of confusion and rage. The expected $7,000 deposit, the deposit that was the very foundation of her lifestyle brand, had not arrived. Her carefully balanced financial ecosystem was already beginning to collapse. She got to her car, her hands shaking so badly she could barely put the key in the ignition. She tried to pull up her bank's website, but the page wouldn't load. Her phone buzzed, an email from her apartment's management company. Subject: rent overdue, final notice. She stared at it. Overdue? But the rent was paid by an automatic transfer from the trust. It was always paid. The panic, cold and sharp, began to rise in her throat. She hit a number on her speed dial. "Adrian!" she shrieked the moment he answered. "Where is the money? Did you get the money?" There was a frantic, screaming voice on the other end. It was her brother, and he was in far worse trouble than she was. At the same time, Selene was being humiliated in the boutique. Adrian was facing his own reckoning. He was in his trendy industrial loft, the perfect backdrop for his performance as a serious artist. His landlord, a large, impatient man, was standing in his doorway, holding a piece of paper. "Mr. Moreau," the landlord said, his voice a low growl. "We have a problem. Your rent check bounced." Adrian stared at him, a look of pure, arrogant disbelief on his face. "Bounced? That's not possible. There must be a mistake with your bank." "There's no mistake with my bank, son," the landlord said, waving the check, which had a large, angry red stamp on it. "The mistake is with yours. It says here, account closed." "Account closed?" Adrian repeated the words. They were nonsensical. He pulled out his phone, his hands suddenly trembling, and logged into his banking app. He stared at the screen, his blood turning to ice water. His checking account, which should have held the fresh $7,000 deposit, now showed a single, stark, and terrifying number. $47,332. The panic, a cold, sickening wave, washed over him. The automatic deposit that paid for this loft, for his expensive coffee, for his entire work-free artistic lifestyle, was not there. His phone rang. It was Selene, screaming. "The money's not there. Did you get the money?" "No," he shrieked back, his voice a high, frantic squeal that was utterly at odds with his cool persona. "My account is... It's... Selene, the account is closed. My rent check bounced." "My cards were declined," she sobbed. "Declined! In front of everyone!" They were two trapeze artists who had just looked down to discover their safety net had been completely and silently removed. Together on the phone, they pieced together the terrible, dawning truth. The joke at the dinner, their mother's strange, cold silence, her cryptic departure, and the timing. The first of the month. It was not a bank error. It was not a coincidence. It was a consequence. A direct and devastating retaliation. "She did this," Selene whispered, her voice a mixture of awe and pure, undiluted terror. "The old woman actually did this." The call came in the early afternoon. I was in my garden, my sanctuary, enjoying a cup of tea in the crisp autumn sun. It was the first truly peaceful moment I had felt in years. My phone began to ring. It was Selene. I let it ring 3 times, a small, quiet assertion of my newfound power. Then I answered. "Hello, Selene?" I said, my voice as calm and serene as the garden around me. "Mom, what did you do?" Her voice was not the smooth, controlled purr of the lifestyle consultant. It was a high, panicked screech, the sound of pure, entitled terror. The money isn't there. The trust deposit didn't come. I called Mr. Kincaid, and he said you canceled it. He said you closed the account. She took a ragged breath. You can't do that. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my tea. Yes, I can, dear, I said, my voice still perfectly calm. I'm the sole trustee. It's my money. I can do whatever I like with it. But our lives depend on that money, she shrieked. And in that single, desperate, beautifully honest sentence, she had finally admitted the truth. Her entire, beautiful, curated life was a lie, a performance, funded by me. I have bills to pay. Adrian's rent check bounced. My cards are declined. How are we supposed to live? Her panic was a symphony, not because I was cruel, but because it was the sound of a long overdue reality finally, violently, crashing down upon her. I'm not sure, Celine, I said, my voice full of a cool clinical detachment. But I am sure it is no longer my problem to solve. But you can't just cut us off, she sobbed, her fury dissolving into a desperate, pleading whimper. We're your children. Yes, you are, I said. And for the first time, a note of the deep, profound hurt I had been suppressing crept into my voice. And I am your mother, a mother who, if I recall correctly from Saturday night's dinner, you are now done taking care of. The silence on the other end of the line was profound. I had taken her own smug, cruel words and turned them into the bars of her new financial prison. You are, I said, my voice clear and final. In effect, fired. Fired? Selena whispered. The word was a small choked sound of disbelief. Yes, I said, and as with any termination, there is a severance. Mr. Kincaid has been instructed to make one final smaller deposit into new separate accounts, which I'm sure you will be opening shortly. I had already arranged it. This wasn't just about anger. It was about a final, clean separation. It is not much, I continued, but it is enough to cover your immediate expenses for 1 month. After that, you are on your own. I was not cutting them off to destroy them. I was cutting them off to, perhaps, finally save them. I was giving them one last, final gift, the gift of reality. You are both healthy, educated, and talented adults, I said, my voice now full of a final, liberating peace. You have been living a wonderful life, a life you have so successfully promoted to the world. I have every confidence that you will figure out how to fund it on your own. She started to protest, a torrent of tears and threats and desperate bargaining. She called me cruel. She said I was destroying her. She said I would be sorry when I was old and really alone. I listened. I let her say it all. I let the poison drain out. When she finally paused, gasping for breath, I spoke. I love you, my daughter, I said, and I meant it. And I truly, truly wish you the best of luck. And then I hung up. I immediately silenced my phone. The angry buzzing of her repeated calls and texts, and then Adrian's, became a distant, meaningless annoyance. I placed the phone face down on the small garden table. I took another sip of my tea. It was still warm. I looked out at my garden, at the beautiful, orderly world I had created with my own 2 hands. A world of quiet, of peace, of solvency. I may have lost the idealized image of the loving, grateful children I had always wanted. I had certainly lost the role of the endlessly accommodating mother, but in exchange, I had regained something far more precious. I had regained myself. The new arrangement was simple. They were to be the architects of their own lives, and I was to be the quiet, and finally, peacefully retired benefactor. The Moreau Family Foundation was closed. The account was settled. I picked up my cane, my new knee aching slightly from the cool air. It was a good ache. a healing ache. I stood up, steadier than I had been in years, and went inside to plan my next trip. The archives in Florence were waiting. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.